This is a presentation that was given at the Texas Institute for Transportation Engineering Conference in Austin, Texas on April 4th. I presented this presentation along with my colleague Donna Dill, and it is about empowering communities. It's about tapping into the disability community in transportation design. It focuses on the potential of collaborating with grassroots disability advocates, particularly through walk audits and through direct advocacy by disabled pedestrians. By bridging the gap between lived experiences and engineering design, the presentation highlights how inclusive, accessible, and equitable pedestrian environments can be achieved. Through shared experience, professional insights, and actionable strategies, this presentation invites traffic engineers and disability advocates to work together in identifying and addressing accessibility barriers. The emphasis is on engaging disabled pedestrians at the design level stage to build safer streets, intersections, and pathways that prioritize equitable mobility for all. So I'll move to the next slide. And I covered most of this. So I'm SMay, and this is my colleague Donna Dill. We're from Waco, Texas, and I am legally blind with a seeing eye dog named Fred, and Donna Dill is a wheelchair user. And we got involved with Mobilize Waco about 3 years ago. Started volunteering with them and doing walk audits and working with the Waco community in making Waco more accessible. It's an older city, a small city. It's about 150,000 people. Not very large, but it has a lot of accessibility gaps. There are sidewalks that aren't there. There are sidewalks that just go nowhere. There are sidewalks that actually empty into steep collection ditches that collect rainwater, which is really fun when you can't see. So there are some accessibility issues, lack of wheelchair ramps, lack of wheelchair curb ramps, and not many accessible pedestrian signals, although we're working on it. There were a lot of issues that we could be addressing there. Next slide. So 18% of the population has a disability. They actually think this number is in the low 20s now, maybe 22, 23%. But almost a quarter of the population has a disability. 50% of the population knows someone, a friend, a family member, a neighbor, who has a disability. That's half the population that knows someone with a disability. Now, I go shopping with my friends. I go out with my family. We go out to eat. We go out to the movies. I'm disabled. There are accessibility features that I need. Donna, definitely, there are things that she needs when she goes out. And a lot of wheelchair users have to do the research ahead of time to make sure that where they're going is somewhere they can get to. Can they get into the building? Do they have an accessible bathroom? Do they have an accessible checkout process? So we like to go out with our family members and friends. We go where we know there is accessibility. So accessibility in the community is very important. The other half of that demographic is that there's half of the population that likely has no real-life connection to disability at all. They don't know anyone who's disabled. They haven't really spent a lot of time around someone who's disabled. And they don't know how they work. How does a blind person get around an intersection? How does a wheelchair user get into the restaurant from the car? They don't know these things. And so if you're designing for this segment of the population, and you don't really have real life experience to back up what you know, where do you get your information from? You get it from TV and the movies. And that generally has been a very poor representation of what disabled people are like. Most people, when they think of blind people, they think of Mary Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, the TV show from the 70s, where she's got her arms out and she's kind of feeling around where she needs to go. Totally inaccurate representation of what blind people are like. If you want a good representation, there's a TV show called Covert Affairs. I believe it was on from 2010 to 2012, maybe. But it has a supporting character who's completely blind, who learned all of the blind skills and learned them, really worked hard and learned them. And he has a job that he's very good at, and he uses his assistive technology and cane skills at his job to do his job very well. But he also has a life outside of work, and he goes shopping, and he has hobbies, he has relationships, a very three-dimensional character. So look that up, because the first time I saw that as a sighted person, and I'm like, well, that's crazy. That doesn't even look anything like a blind person. Now that I know what he knows, and know all of the assistive technology and know a lot of the blind skills, I look at that and I'm thinking, wow, he's really rocking it. And yes, he's blind. He was not played by a blind actor, but the contrast between what I knew then and what I know now made the difference in believing that that was a believable character. I get that question a lot when I'm out in public. It's like, well, you don't look blind. Well, what does blind look like? A lot of what the public think blind should look like is an all or nothing thing, and the whole Mary Ingalls thing. I don't know anybody with a disability that is that inept. So we're all out there, we're working, we have jobs, we go to the grocery store, we go to the movies, we go out to eat, we get out in our community, we volunteer, strong volunteer demographic there. So a lot of this is changing the perception of what people think people with disabilities are really about, but especially in the design demographic, the traffic engineers, the urban planners, the designers, all of that. We really want to get with them and partner with them and show them this is how we do things, and this is what we need. Disability, we don't consider disability a limitation. It's a mismatch between someone's abilities and how society is structured. So we want to get society structured to where everybody can get around equally well.
I'll tell you one of my favorite phrases is that blindness is not my barrier. My barrier is low expectations and negative stereotypes. That is my barrier. And that is the basis for every other barrier out there, whether it's physical barriers where there's no sidewalk. Somebody wasn't expecting a person with a wheelchair to be rolling down there.
So some of the challenges we face are missing curb ramps, inaccessible accessible pedestrian signals, sidewalk obstructions, or misalignment of accessible pedestrian signals. Navigating sidewalks, crosswalks, and transit stops are also challenging. So this is my friend Donna Dill, and this was something we encountered in Waco, and this is actually very common in Waco. The sidewalk ends, and for 6 feet, there's grass, and most people think, well, you can just walk in the grass. Well, for wheelchair users, no, that's not an option. It's very difficult to get over to the sidewalk through the grass like that. It's kind of doable in a manual wheelchair. It's almost impossible in a motorized wheelchair. So that was one of the things we faced is sidewalks that go nowhere. This is another thing we have encountered in Waco is sidewalk obstructions, to where we can't get down the sidewalk to get to the next corner or get to the next curb ramp. This is my friend Bruce Huff, and he's in a motorized wheelchair. He does this quite often when there isn't a sidewalk, and it's very dangerous. People have gotten killed over this. We know people that have gotten killed over this. But it's very common to see people in motorized wheelchairs going down a lane of traffic because there's no sidewalk. That goes back to, blindness is not my barrier. My barrier is the low expectations and negative stereotypes. Nobody believes that people in wheelchairs would be going down the sidewalk. So they don't worry about the fact that it's inaccessible because able-bodied people can just walk through the dirt and then back up onto the sidewalk and you're good. Well, that's not the case for wheelchair users. And a lot of the times they just don't know that wheelchair users can't do that, and they don't think through the problem. This is another problem. And I have a video clip for this, but I'm going to preface it just a little bit. This is two accessible pedestrian signals pointing at two different crosswalks on the same pole. And what I'm going to talk about in the clip is the fact that accessible pedestrian signals nowadays adjust to the ambient noise of the intersection. So if the intersection is very quiet, they're quieter. And if a large truck comes by, they adjust in noise and they get louder. Well, when they're right next to each other, I'll let the clip tell you.
Controls which crosswalk at all, because they adjust to the ambient, they adjust volume-wise to the ambient noise, so when they're right next to each other, they're feeding off of each other and they're really loud, and you can't tell which one goes to which one. And I don't remember the exact statistics, it's between 60 and 80% of blind people will choose the wrong one consistently. Sighted pedestrians, 30% of them will choose the wrong one. Many people, and I have done this when I was sighted, I just press both of them because I don't know. Well, then you've got one of them saying walk. The walk sign is on. Which crosswalk? I don't know. So I'm on a mission to make this go away because this is so incredibly confusing and it's dangerous. I realize there are constraints, but I believe that technology is evolving rapidly enough that this will go away. Okay, you can move on before I... Okay.
Okay, and some of the other problems we face are curb ramps like this one. So this is very easy for someone like Donna in a wheelchair to navigate because it is flush with the street. Blind people, however, and you see the detectable warning surfaces here, the red rectangular patches of domes, that's to warn a blind person that there's a barrier coming up. There's a street coming up that you need to be careful. Because if those weren't there, a lot of times it's very difficult for us to tell with our canes the difference between the curb and the asphalt. And if you're not paying attention, you can walk right out into the street. So the detectable warning surfaces are there for us to realize, hey, okay, I need to stop and I need to pay attention. So when I come up to a corner, I find a detectable warning surface first and figure that where that is in my brain and kind of keep track of where it is. And then I go find the accessible pedestrian signal, which should be, this is actually in the wrong spot because there are two here on one pole. They're supposed to be to the outside edge of the crosswalk. So it's supposed to be over here. Outside edge of the crosswalk, next to and pointing down the crosswalk, next to the curb ramp of the crosswalk it controls. That's where it's supposed to be. Rarely do I find them where they're supposed to be. Anyway, so I have to go press the button to say I need a walk signal, and then come back and I stand there at the truncated domes and I'm waiting for my walk signal. All well and good, right? Where are the tire tracks? So if I'm standing there and I have a distracted driver, what is the likelihood of me getting hit? Quite high. I would rather there be curbs there with curb ramps so that if there's a distracted driver, they hit the curb and realize they've cut the corner too close. This way, they may hit me before they realize they cut the corner too close. So one of the things we do with Mobilize Waco is we do walk audits. And I didn't go into, I forgot to tell you about Mobilize Waco a little bit. So we do walk audits. We do different things in the community that promote people with disabilities and promote accessibility and advocacy and leadership. A walk audit is a detailed assessment of a street or area's walkability, and it focuses on safety and ease for pedestrians, and it's used to identify areas that need improvement and for advocate for pedestrian-friendly changes. It often uncovers real-world accessibility barriers that maybe didn't show up in the design process. We try to involve engineers, urban planners, disability advocates, disability professionals, city officials, and we also, a lot of times in this area, we get researchers from Texas A&M Transportation Institute will come and do walk audits with us. We document barriers and things that are wrong. We'll use our iPhones, we use photos, we use videos. I often use videos to record the issues and the things I liked in the intersection. So I'll just put my video recorder on, and I'll walk around all four corners of the intersection just talking into the video camera. I can't aim it very well because I can't see what I'm aiming it at. I can't see the screen, but usually I can get pretty close. And so we document things that way. We document not only what's wrong, but we also document things we liked and things that looked great and things that did great. We use measurement tools and mapping tools to also help us problem solve the intersection. And we often put this in Geographic Information Systems format, GIS format, which helps us highlight the most common problems. And it's easy for TexITE to come back and look at that and say, oh, okay, we want to see this intersection. So we try to make it easy for them too. So involving disability advocates at the design stage, there's a lot of pros to doing it this way. When you get to the design stage, ask for input and use it in the decision-making process. There are standards and guidelines that you do have to follow, but it's nice to have some real-world lived experience from people who actually are the end users for this. When you have community meetings, invite disability advocates to the public forums, to the stakeholder interviews, to the walk audits, and ask them, did we interpret your needs correctly? And is there anything we missed? Because sometimes you've met all the standards and guidelines. Sometimes it's something that you can incorporate into the design process that makes it just easier for a barrier where there doesn't need to be anybody crossing, so put a physical barrier there, a hedge or a railing, so that people know to go on around the sidewalk to where you do need to cross. Things like that. Incorporate feedback loops. So don't just include us at the beginning of the design process, but circle back to show what was done with that input and how we have been trying to meet your needs. Keep the community voices actively engaged throughout the process, not just at the beginning. This lets us know that our information was actually used and not just performative, and it builds trust through transparency. So, talk to us at the beginning, talk to us as it's going on, and then show us what was done at the end, and come back and say, hey, is there anything, you see anything else that maybe we missed? One of the things in talking with blind pedestrians and traffic engineers is there is a language barrier. Most blind pedestrians learn to navigate an intersection with an orientation and mobility instructor. They are licensed to teach people how to use a blind cane. And the O&M profession has its own set of vocabulary, and the traffic engineering profession also has its own set of vocabulary. And there's quite a few words that look the same, sound the same, mean totally different things. They're spelled the same, everything. They're called homographs. They mean totally different things. So these are some of the words. Orientation for an O&M instructor is knowing where you are in space. For a planner, it's the directional layout of roads and buildings. Is it north up? So those two terms sound the same. It sounds like we could be talking about the same thing, and they mean totally different things. Another one is right-of-way. When a planner uses right-of-way, the term right-of-way, they mean the land or space reserved for streets, sidewalks, or public access. That's right-of-way. For an O&M instructor, it means who does not have to yield when crossing. I actually did this wrong in the slide, but who doesn't have to yield when crossing? They have the right-of-way. So those are two terms that just can create a lot of confusion. So understand that there can be language barriers there as well. This is where to find and sustain collaboration with disability advocacy organizations. These are organizations that can help you find people in your area that are good advocates and that may be knowledgeable about the subject, or at least do a lot of traveling independently, that can help you with disability advocacy and collaboration. Barring these organizations, you can Google your state plus pedestrian accessibility or pedestrian safety, and sometimes there will be groups that come up. You can look at the Governor's Council or Mayor's Council on People with Disabilities for your state or your city. Worst comes to worst, we have our contact on the information on the next page, and you can contact us at Mobilize Waco, and we will try to help find you something. I'm on the committees for several state and national organizations that deal with blind pedestrians, but also disability pedestrian safety for people with disabilities. So you can contact us, and we will try to find you someone that you can hook up with. There are disabled people that want to be part of the conversation in your community. We just need to join up and hook up in with them together. And so we encourage you to build relationships with disability advocates and disability professionals so that we can improve the design process. And this is my contact information and Donna's contact information if you'd like to contact us about making your community more accessible. We had some interesting Q&As, and so I wanted to highlight them if I can find it. Looking at that really fast. Okay, so what one gentleman said was that in many communities there are design constraints. When they run across design constraints, they are given an ultimatum: either put in the pedestrian facilities and risk it not being compliant, or not having what you need, or don't put in the pedestrian facilities at all, and not have the access. Okay, so here's the question. Often when looking into proposed pedestrian facilities, we are given an ultimatum when a design situation looks problematic. Either include no pedestrian facilities due to concerns that the facilities won't be compliant, or risk designing facilities only not to be able to resolve the associated issues. As an industry, how can we work to mitigate this issue? So, in plainer language, that says when engineers or planners are designing a new pedestrian crossing, sometimes they're told it's better to leave out the sidewalks or crosswalks entirely if they can't meet full ADA compliance. But that means people with disabilities, or anyone walking really, are left with nothing. And how can we as a field avoid this all or nothing situation and still move forward with improving accessibilities? We have to shift away from a mindset of perfect or nothing. Waiting for the perfect fix often means that people are stuck with nothing in the meantime. And that's the most dangerous option of all, especially for pedestrians who are blind or low vision. One way to mitigate this is through early collaboration in the design process that includes accessibility specialists and people with disabilities and engineers at the concept stage, not after the drawings are done. And we can also make use of interim solutions or phased upgrades, where we acknowledge that while it might not meet full compliance today, we are making measurable improvements with a plan for what comes next. And finally, we need to shift the conversation. We need to shift the framework of the real risk isn't installing an imperfect signal or crosswalk. The real risk is doing nothing and leaving vulnerable pedestrians in harm's way. If we approach it from a risk to the user perspective rather than a risk to the agency perspective, the priorities change. So that was one of the great questions I had gotten after this speech. Thank you, and I'm glad you were able to listen today.